All right, let's get into it. We're going to look at three ancient stories that all happen in the same place, a vineyard. But trust me, these are way more than just tales about farming. They are designed to take our modern ideas about what's fair, what we deserve, and who's in charge, and turn them completely on their head. Seriously, just imagine that for a second. You've been working hard all day long, you're tired, you've put in the hours, and then you see the person who just showed up for the last 60 minutes get the exact same paycheck as you. How would that feel? Probably not great, right? Well, that feeling of unfairness, that's exactly where this whole thing kicks off. So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the question that got these stories started. Then we'll walk through each of the three parables, one by one. After that, we're going to put on our detective hats and decode what all the symbols mean. And finally, we'll figure out the big takeaway. Who actually gets the vineyard in the end? Okay, so why were these stories even told? They didn't just come out of nowhere. They were actually a direct answer to a very real, very human question from one of Jesus's inner circle, the disciple Peter. And this is the question that sets the whole thing in motion. Peter is basically saying, hey, we've given up everything for this, so what's in it for us? What's our payback? It's a totally normal question about getting what you've earned, but the answer he gets is not what anyone expected. Because the answer to Peter's question basically blows up the whole idea of earning your reward. These stories are about to introduce us to a totally different system, a kind of spiritual economy. And in this economy, the rules are different. It's not about what you deserve. It's about grace, what you're freely given. Which brings us to our first case study and how this new economy works. This story goes right at that feeling of unfairness we talked about, and it features a landowner with a, let's say, very unique way of handling payroll. So the story goes like this. A landowner goes out super early in the morning to hire some workers. But then he goes out again at 9 a.m. and hires more, and again at noon, and again at 3 p.m. He even goes out one last time at 5 p.m. with only an hour left in the workday and hires a final group. He agrees to pay that first group a denarius, which was pretty much the standard fair wage for a full day of labor back then. Now, hang on to that number, 1 denarius, because that single coin is about to cause a whole lot of trouble. So payday comes. The owner tells his manager to pay everyone, but to start with the people who were hired last. And guess what? The 1-hour workers each get a full denarius. Then the next group gets a denarius, and so on. When the all-day workers finally get to the front of the line, the ones who endured the brutal heat all day, they also get 1 denarius. And they are furious. They feel like it's a huge injustice. But here's the twist. The parable is designed to make us switch sides. We're not supposed to sympathize with the grumpy all-day workers who feel cheated. The whole point is for us to see ourselves as the last workers in line, the ones who showed up at the last second and got this incredible unearned gift. It's not about fairness. It's about a generosity that seems almost reckless. It's about grace. All right, our second story shifts gears a little bit. If the first one was about grace versus earning, this one zeroes in on what kind of obedience really matters. It's a quick, sharp little story about a father and his 2 sons. It's a really simple setup. A father asks his 2 sons to go work in the vineyard. The first son gives the perfect answer, "I will go, sir." Super respectful, but he doesn't actually go. The second son is a bit of a rebel. He just flat out says, "I will not." But then, later on, he feels bad about it, changes his mind, and actually heads out to the vineyard to work. So the big question is, which one of them actually did what the father wanted?
Now, this isn't just about 2 kids, it's an allegory. Son number 1, the one with all the right words but no action, he represents the religious establishment of the time. They looked good on the outside, said all the right things, but their hearts weren't in it. And son number 2, he represents the outsiders, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, people who started out on the wrong path, but then had a genuine change of heart and followed through with their actions. It turns out, what you do matters a lot more than what you say you'll do.
And that brings us to our third and final story. And I gotta tell you, this one is the most intense of the bunch. The stakes get raised from generosity and obedience to a full-blown, violent confrontation over who's really in charge. So in this story, a man plants a vineyard and leases it out to some tenant farmers. When harvest time comes, he sends a servant to collect his share, but the tenants grab the servant and beat him. So he sends another one. They attack and humiliate him. He sends a third, and they wound him and toss him out. The violence just keeps escalating. Finally, the owner thinks, okay, I'll send my own son. Surely they'll respect him. But when the tenants see the son, they think, this is our chance. If we kill him, the vineyard will be ours. So that's exactly what they do. Well, the end of this story is pretty brutal and direct. The owner will come back, bring those terrible tenants to a terrible end, and he'll lease the vineyard to other people who will actually give him his fruit when it's due. It's a really stark warning about what happens when you reject the owner's legitimate authority.
Okay, so we have these three stories: workers, sons, tenants. They seem different, but they're all set in a vineyard, and they're all speaking the same symbolic language. To really get what's going on, we need to see them as an allegory.
And an allegory is really just a story where the characters and events stand for something else. They're symbols for bigger ideas or even real historical figures and events. And in these parables, pretty much everything is a symbol. So when you start decoding, a really clear pattern emerges. In all three stories, the owner is God. The vineyard represents his people, Israel, and by extension, the church. The servants who get beaten, they represent the prophets from the Old Testament. And the son? Well, the son is Jesus. The bad guys in each story, the jealous workers, the promise-breaking son, the violent tenants, they all represent the corrupt leaders who are opposing God. And the heroes, the last-minute workers, the son who actually obeys, the new tenants, they represent anyone who repents and follows. So that brings us to the big, unifying conclusion from all three of these powerful stories. After all this talk about grace, obedience, and authority, it all boils down to one critical question. Who gets the vineyard in the end? Who truly inherits? And the answer is clear. The inheritance doesn't go to the person who worked the longest or the one who said all the right things, and definitely not to the people who tried to take it by force. It goes to those who humbly accept the owner's radical generosity, who show their commitment through their actions, and who recognize the authority of the true owner and his son. This single line, which was said right after the story of the two sons, just perfectly sums up the shocking, upside-down reality of this new economy. It's saying that the people everyone looked down on, the outcasts, were actually getting it right, while the ones who seemed so righteous on the outside were missing the point completely. And that really is the question these stories leave us with today. They cut through all the noise and ask us to look at ourselves. Forget about what we think we deserve or what we say we believe. The question is simple. When it comes down to it, are we the first son who just talks the talk? Or are we the second son who ultimately walks the walk?